Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I am so excited about today's guest. We've been talking off the air, and her energy just gets me so excited for all the things that we're going to be discussing. And I will very transparently share with you that as soon as our team saw the very name of her business, we said, we need to have this amazing entrepreneur on because her business is called Abundance Leadership Consulting. What a great name. And I think it reveals so much about her attitude, her energy, her values, the things she prioritizes. And quite frankly, she's just amazing as a person and as an entrepreneur. So let me tell you all about today's guest. Her name is Jennifer Sconyers. Jennifer founded Abundance Leadership Consulting to facilitate connections and to break down systems hampering social impact. Her entrepreneurial journey was born out of her own experiences of feeling overworked, stressed, and isolated in previous roles. Having worked over 20 years in for-profit and national nonprofit sectors that provided different forms of client engagement and training, Jennifer saw how organizations were often hindered by disconnects. This inspired her to found her company to help organizations and teams not just perform better, but to see themselves as part of a larger community ecosystem. She pairs her more than 20 years of experience with a master's degree in political science and a bachelor's degree in communication from the University of Illinois at Springfield. She also has her certification in mergers and acquisitions from the Wharton School of Business, which we're so grateful to be partnered with on this show as well. Her educational background, along with her years of experience in creating a high-performing team, provides her with unique expertise to lead Abundance Leadership Consulting. Now, whether you've got a team yet or not, the way that Jennifer thinks about people and connections and creating a culture where people succeed, it impacts all of our businesses. So I'm excited about this one. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Jennifer Sconyers. All right, Jennifer, I am so very excited to have you here on the show. First things first, welcome.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
Heck yes, you do such cool and meaningful and important work, and I'm excited to dive into it. But before we get there, you've got to take us beyond the bio. Who's Jennifer? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Well, thank you. So essentially, I'm a person who's naturally curious. And I'm curious about people and how they behave and interact. I also really love community. So I grew up in an environment where my parents just really encouraged me to connect with folks who weren't like me, to understand their stories, who they are, what moves them, what motivates them. And so that curiosity is something I've taken throughout my adult life. And it's taken me to interesting places. So before I started this business, I worked in politics and campaigns for years, in public policy and advocacy. I worked in television for a while, but all that was from this space of curiosity. And through that, I learned a lot. I learned how teams work and how they don't work. I had my own experiences on teams as a team lead and also as an employee and figuring out, like, what do I need to be successful? As this group need to be successful? So all of that really brought me to here. I think also it's important to say is that I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. So since I was 15 years old, I knew I'd have my own business. I didn't know what it would be. Back then, I thought I would sell clothes and shoes for extended sizes because that was my jam back when I was 15. But I always knew I wanted to run my own thing and make a positive impact.
Yes, I love that overview, especially because that entrepreneurial bug, once it's in there, the only way to satisfy it is to launch your own business. And Jennifer, I'm going to humble brag for you for a little bit because you didn't just start your business. You are 9 years into what it is that you're doing. That's a huge impact. Take us through there because I think personally, it's my big belief that we need to celebrate longevity in entrepreneurship so much more than we do because everyone, the media loves to talk about, these seemingly overnight successes. But you've been impacting people for 9 years and creating value in the marketplace. What's changed during that time? That's a huge celebration, Jennifer.
Well, thank you for that. It's so interesting. So I started my business April 1st of 2016. I joke about that because it's April Fool's Day, but this was not a joke. I went down to my local small business development center where I actually knew the folks there and they helped me start ALC. I didn't know what I was doing, but I had an idea and a dream, if you will. And I literally sat down on my couch and mapped out what's this business going to be and what's the impact I need to make. And I think more importantly, who do I need to be as a leader? So I like to say that because when I coach people who are entrepreneurs who want to figure it out, it doesn't all just come to you. There's a series of learnings and breakthroughs. And I had to transform myself essentially in the process. I had to work through my own stuff. I call it those like negative conversations that we might have in our own heads about what we can't do or it's too hard. And I had to work through all of that. I think the other thing I had to do early was compare, okay, this journey I'm choosing to be on versus past jobs. And every day I chose into entrepreneurship. And I think that's important. At no point did I say, oh, it'd be easier if I just had a main gig again, a W-2 somewhere. At every point in the journey, I've said, okay, this is exactly where I need to be, even though it's hard. It's not as hard as when I was employed somewhere else. I have agency. I can make an impact. And that's been super useful, as well as having people in my corner. So I didn't do this alone. I had a network of people here in Columbus, Ohio, where we have a lot of opportunities for small business owners and small business incubation. And I just lean on the wisdom of other people just to learn what do I need to do? What should I try? And then I think also just being nimble, being strategic about risk taking and taking risks and having an idea and testing it out and, getting client feedback and making the adjustments. So it's been that nimbleness that's been helpful for us. What I will say, though, and it's now 2024, almost 2025, the conditions of this year are very similar to the conditions when I started the business in terms of public conversations, political conversations, what's happening in the zeitgeist, if you will, were very similar to how I started. So it's kind of one of those things where I feel like the more things change, the more things stay the same. ALC's gone through this evolution, and we're going into what I'll call our next evolution of growth. And so really just taking all these years of learning and experiences and client feedback to inform where we go next.
Gosh, Jennifer, there's so many things I love and appreciate about that overview that you just gave us. I want to call this out, though, because you shared something with us that I don't hear from many entrepreneurs, and that is very early on, you recognized that you needed to ask yourself, what type of leader do I want to be? What type of leader do I need to be? Jennifer, I would argue that most people, when they start their business, they obsess about their product or their service and the people that they serve without recognizing the important role that they're stepping into. Take us behind the scenes there. That's powerful stuff that I think we all need to confront and answer in our own journeys as we begin our businesses.
Yeah, well, one of those things that I did in the very beginning was I just knew, and this is when I was still working for someone else, there were things that I was getting my own way in a certain way. Like there was a certain way that I viewed the world, the certain ways that I was navigating things, addressing challenges that would have me stuck or stymied. So I did some really intentional emotional intelligence work. I got coached. I went to trainings. I asked for support and advice from people who were further along on their journeys. And I wanted to address head on the things that had me stuck. I had a narrative in my brain about what I thought I could do and accomplish in my life. And that was informed by maybe what my parents taught me or what I got in the environments I was in. But I knew to be an entrepreneur required me to think very differently. And so it was a stretch. It was hard. I'm not going to say that any of this was easy. And this is also why I chose the name I did, Abundance Leadership Consulting. So having that abundance mindset was going to be really important and a reminder for me, because I realized my thinking had been quite scarce and that I'd been very limited in terms of what I believed was possible or what I could do or the impact that could be made. So the word abundance was important. The crux of our work is leadership. So leadership in all forms, individually, in teams, in communities. So that was also a signal in terms of the work that I wanted us to do. And the consulting framework was one that's broad enough where it allowed us to do all the things we do. So coaching, facilitation, training, planning, all those things. But, I had to be really intentional, I guess, to answer that question. And seek the support advice of people who are further along on their journeys, who've done that transformational work. And just kind of use them as examples and figure out what would that look like for me.
Yeah, I really appreciate those insights and behind the scenes story, Jennifer. I do want to go deep into the work that you do with Abundance Leadership Consulting because, as you heard me say in the teaser of this episode, it was the very name of your business that made our team say, holy cow, let's look deeper into what Jennifer does. This is important stuff and meaningful work that she's doing. And right on your website, I want to read from the headline. I'm a big fan, well-crafted headlines, and I know that it didn't come to you overnight. It's obviously because you're in the work, but it's so hard to craft these headlines, and you did it so succinctly. Happy staff, healthy organization, bringing teams into meaningful community. Now, Jennifer, you talk about the larger discourse societally, and I feel like somewhere along the way we've lost our sense in so many different facets of today's society what community means, and we don't often think about work or organizations as our communities. Heck, a lot of people don't even think about their neighborhoods as communities these days, which is so sad to see. Why is that word so prevalent in your messaging? What is it about community? What does that mean to you, and how does it fit in as the aspirational goal that we should be working towards?
Absolutely. Well, at the core of our work at ALC is relationships. So I often tell people none of us are floating in a bubble above a cloud. We are interconnected, and that is essential in building healthy relationships. Those can be personal, they can be professional. The work we do at ALC is focused on the professional side of those relationships, but the work impacts all of your relationships. I think, we're going through so much as society. There's been so much change. When I think of the last 8 years, even just like the last 4 with the pandemic, and we had to navigate that change. And now we've had another major national election. There's going to be even more change. Change is something that's the ever constant, but to navigate it well, we actually can't do it well alone. We actually do need others around us, and not just for the purpose of having a series of transactions to get things done, but actually so we can collectively move forward. So that piece around relationships, I think, is important, because if we can actively support one another and moving our communities and society forward, I think we're all better off. So we all do better and we all do better. That was a quote from Paul Wellstone, former senator from Minnesota. And that is actually something that I think of, and that's actually the root of what we do at ALC.
Yeah, I love how you articulate those things, Jennifer. Obviously, you're very well versed, having done the work for so long. But when I think about the nature of your work, it feels like a double-sided coin, which is, one, we need individuals to do the work, and we need to guide people. I love hearing the way you talk about abundance, because that's a challenge we all face, not only as entrepreneurs, but we can extrapolate any of this into just our lives and us as people. We need to have that abundance mindset. So you're simultaneously working with teams, which teams are comprised of individuals, but then also that team, that collective element of it. How do you navigate those waters of both sides of that coin?
Yeah, well, I see it as a both and, not an either or. So teams need strong leadership. And so it's really ensuring that folks who are leading those teams, so we look at managers, supervisors, executive leaders, business owners, making sure they have the support and tools that they need to lead effectively, while also working with the team as a whole. So what's the team wrestling with or struggling with or working through, and how can the team collectively come together? So for us, it's both of those things when working within an organizational system. I think the other piece that makes us unique at ALC is that we know that organization or that university or that company isn't by itself. It's engaging and interacting with other businesses, other humans, other people, and they have to figure out how to navigate in those systems well. So our approach is also a systemic approach. It's a both and of individual teams, the people who lead them, as well as how they navigate and relate to the systems around them.
Yeah, Jennifer, whenever I get to talk to people like you who are amazing at understanding all of these very complex dynamics that we're talking about here today, is I love asking about the underlying motives. And especially for you, I've been really excited to have this conversation with you because you've worked in the for-profit sector, you've worked in the nonprofit sector. And I think that, just to make a big generalization, it's easy for us societally to say, well, the nonprofit space is very much fueled by their mission. They're very much fueled by the impact that they want to have on the world. It's in the very name of the business model, which is non-profit. Profit is not the main motive there. However, in teams, everyone has their own motives. Some people do prioritize, I want to get financially stable. Some people prioritize freedom. I want to travel more or spend more time with my family. There's so many different motives, Jennifer, and in any team setting, there's people with all different types of motives. How the heck do we, I guess, one, make sense of those motives and understand what drives people, and then two, have them all work in harmony together?
For sure. Well, something that everyone has is what you named, and I like to call it self-interest. So everyone has a self-interest. It's the thing that motivates them, that moves them, that drives them, and motivates them to take certain actions. Those actions can be actions of their personal life, their professional life, or both. And so I think in a team, this is why having clear vision, mission, and values is just so important, because in a team, you do want values alignment. I might have personal values, but I'm on this team. I need to know, what are our team's values? Do we all know what those are and what they mean? And more importantly, are we aligned to them? So, before we do any deep work with groups, we really dig into what some of those values are. We do that different ways. We can do an assessment. We can have one-on-one conversations. I should name that oftentimes we're brought in because teams are in conflict. So they're wrestling with some of these issues of the different motivations and interests. So a lot of this is really figuring out where there is values alignment, seeing what's possible, and then kind of moving from there. So if we understand that, what motivates people, we can then begin to start a process of, okay, what are the conditions required for you to work through these differences and challenges you're having?
Yeah, Jennifer, hearing this, it brings me back. I only worked in corporate America for 10 months. It was after I graduated from college, and I couldn't help but smirk. I'd been running my own businesses at that point. I was already had one foot on the way out because I was already launching my next business. And so with that in mind, I couldn't help but smirk in the corporate meetings when the CEO would say, these are the things that we believe in. And it was kind of that mission statement. And then I would go back to the building that I worked in, and that's where hundreds of us were located in those offices. And Jennifer, what the CEO was saying didn't come to life in our day-to-day work because it was merely words. Where's that gap? Why do those words and those missions that I think we all on paper, we all are just like, yeah, of course we subscribe to those things, but getting it embedded in our culture, in our work, in the way that teams operate together, it's an entirely different thing. So why is that so hard? Where does it get lost from words to action?
Absolutely. Well, I think this is some of the work we do at ALC is that, it's not just about defining what the values are, but getting really explicit and what it means to live those values and not live those values. And this is something that you can use in the evaluation process. If you do employee evaluations or 360s, is this person living these values? It's something that the team can actively check in on. So if you're scheduling regular checks with your team, and you should if you're not, it's really having those values in the backdrop where they are explicit, are we living this or not? If we're not, what do we need to change? So it does allow for the conditions to have some really important conversation as a team to ensure that you're living them. And I will say employees are super smart. They know, they know if company leadership is walking the talk, as it were, right? They know if their manager or supervisor is walking the talk and living the values or not. And for those who are leading the teams, it's really important they lead by example. So if a CEO or anyone in the C-suite's not living those values, the whole company or team is going to suffer because they're saying, oh, that person's not even living that. This is true for anyone who's leading a team. So a team lead or a supervisor or a manager, it is important that they embody those values, but are also equipped with how to work with team members when they're struggling with that or they can't. So there's so much we do around culture of feedback. And what does that mean? How do you create conditions to have constructive feedback in the space that you're navigating and working in? And not only feedback that's corrective in nature, but to give praise, when people do things well, or if there's some minor adjustments folks need to make, how do you do that well? And then what is purely corrective, how do you do that in a way that can be heard?
Yeah, super important stuff. And I will say it's kind of this recurring theme behind all of our conversation today is that we are leaders. Whether we have stepped into that role or not, others are watching. You talk about leading by example. Jennifer, most business owners, most leaders have never been taught how to be leaders. They observe leaders along their way, but I often think about the nature of our careers is that when we're good at what we do, we get rewarded by being promoted and then we become a leader. But the reason why we were good at what we did was because we were good at the work. Leadership is an entirely different skill set that we've never been taught. So break that down for us, because obviously it's a big word and there's a lot of literature about it. But Jennifer, from your perspective, you've seen all different types of leaders as well. So how the heck can we boil it down into what is that function of a leader?
Yeah, well, we have trainings at ALC, and I know we'll talk later in terms of things we might offer. Anything you want from us, you can probably find on our website, jennifersconyers.org. But essentially, we have whole coaching models and trainings on management versus leadership, and really breaking down what that is. And I think when we think of managers, we think that kind of in a vacuum. It's someone who's being very directive. It's someone who's just making sure that as a whole, that the team is getting the job done. This is a person that also can give course or provide course correction for the team, etc. So they're the person that really holds that bottom line of that team production that sets on their shoulders as a manager, particularly our mid-level managers. They really shoulder that burden. In leadership, and I want to say it's a both and, right? In leadership, it's actually bringing people along and getting them to follow you. So that's actually a very different kind of mindset versus being directive, telling people what needs to get done, making sure that the thing gets done. A leader is someone who understands the team members' individual motivations, what moves them, what drives them, where they're struggling. That leader will coach them, right? So that leader can provide some coaching around areas of improvement, but also trumpeting that employees' success. And they'll mentor them too, right? Or provide opportunities for them to be mentored by other people. It could be peers or folks in that organization or outside, right? So that leader is actively developing that employee or that staff member. And a manager is giving direction. So effective management puts both those two things together. You're both being directive in terms of what needs to happen, have a clear roadmap, have clear benchmarks for the team to meet, while also seeing where your team members are, making sure they have the coaching, the support they need, the feedback that they need to be successful. So when we think of leadership in the context of how do you manage and lead a team, you're doing both of those things. You're both managing and you're leading.
Yeah, Jennifer, the more we talk about this, the more I realize we're introducing all of these important players and pieces into the conversation, which of course reveals why this stuff is so complicated and why it's so hard to get it right. We're talking about management, leadership. We've talked about values and mission and motivations, and all of these different things are all playing at the same time. So I'm going to ask you this question because I feel like when we talk about culture, so many people, it's an intangible thing. You know, we've heard that word. We understand what culture is inherently, but how do we make sense of it? And I'm going to put you on the spot here as our trusted expert because Jennifer, you walk into other businesses and you help first identify what is the culture here. And then you start, of course, helping organizations build towards the culture that they want so that everybody can succeed. But let's talk about that first step. How do you walk in and make sense of something that is so intangible? It's just in the air inside of a team. What are the things that you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a few things. One is system, structure, and process. I feel like that's pretty standard for anyone who's doing organizational development work. It's really looking at what systems do you have in place, what process do you have in place, what does that look like, what's working or not working. I think the other way that's really important has to do with how people relate to each other. And that actually signals what the values are. So without just reading, a company organization's mission statement or strategic plan, we do that. But actually, it's an engaging with the team. It can be through interviews. It could be through an assessment process. Really get a sense of what are the actual values, whether they're tangible or not, and how are they being lived? How are people experiencing the environment tells us so much. And all of that gives us a sense of, well, what is actually happening in this culture and or in this organizational system, and what are the needs, and what are some things that we can do to help them move forward. So that ends up being the process. And like I said, it can be through interviews, it can be through surveying. We usually do a combination of both of those things. And oftentimes that gives us enough intelligence to begin to start. And we start oftentimes with coaching the leadership. So once we have that feedback from staff, we also work with boards as well, and we have a sense of what's really going on here, how are decisions being made, how are people, interpreting decision making, what are the processes you have in place, that gives us some intelligence to actually begin to make recommendations and work with the leadership to start to make the changes they want to see.
Yeah, very well said. And also a very big task, because I think this is revealing there's so much work to be done, which is huge opportunities for us to move forward. The thing that I really like about your work, Jennifer, is that if your business is struggling, well, great. Then there's a lot of room to make improvements so that you can stop struggling. But if your business is rolling and it's doing really well, awesome. There's still so much work to be done, and then you can reach those new levels. So I really appreciate the depth to the work that you do as well. I want to ask you about that very work, because I can imagine when you walk in and you talk about executive coaching and leadership development, for example, these are people who are at a high point in their careers. They're people who have typically had the answers. They're the people that people turn to for advice and for guidance. When you step in there, is it easy for them to get rid of all those beliefs and shackles and say, strip me to my bare elements so that you can help me rebuild into a better leader? Or what's that self-awareness level? How do you even begin that work with them?
Well, it varies. As you can imagine, it does vary. There's usually a pain point that's brought us in to work with an organization. In the early days of the business, we were brought in because organizations and teams were bleeding talent, specifically diverse talent, even more specifically African American or Black talent. Like, people were leaving and they didn't know why, and they couldn't keep people on the team, and they didn't know what the root causes were, even though they tried. And so that was a root cause that brought us in. So there was like, we have a problem we can't solve. We need help. We want you to help us. So that was a motivator to bring us in the first place, which also created conditions for us to have some really important and oftentimes really tough conversations. We would also have people that I would say, stakeholders to the company organization. They could be people it could be customers or clients. It could be folks who give them money. So in the nonprofit space, funders who are saying, we're seeing something happen externally here and we're worried. We're worried about this entity in terms of what they're doing, how they're behaving, how they're being perceived by their membership, whatever, or their customer or client base. We need your help. So I named that pain point was a motivator to bring us in, but to also to begin to listen. Now, I'm not saying that, and I'm a straight shooter. I'm very direct with people. I do it with kindness and love, but I'm not going to lie to you. So, I'm always very upfront in terms of what we're saying, but also there are ways to work through it. So I think for the leaders who are really serious about making the changes, they know this is important to the organization and its health, to their bottom lines. Those are leaders who are willing to work through what I call the icky, tricky stickiness of this work and are willing to be all in to move things forward, even when it's hard. For the leaders who struggle with that, it takes longer. And I name it. I'm like, the more resistance you have, the longer it'll take. You can't have your foot on the gas pedal and on the brake. You won't move forward. So it's a choice. You have agency. I often say I'm not a miracle worker. What I can do, though, is be the person to help you in this process and guide you to get the results that you want. So our team is made of practitioners who are compassionate, but also very honest. And I selected a team of coaches and trainers and facilitators who do just that. Based on their professional backgrounds, they have the intelligence, the will, and the capacity to really hold a lot of complexity with people, to hold space for like the hard, tough, challenging things, and to help them work through it. And then as a team, we work together to support folks in terms of getting the results that they want. But the short answer is it's hard and it varies, but for folks who are really interested and who really want to do this, they go all in. And I also appreciate people at different parts of the journey. So for some people, the one-on-one coaching is exactly what they need. We get in there with them. For others who are not quite there yet, so we have different training models they can do that gradually gets them there. So we do meet folks where they are and based on what their needs are as well.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And Jennifer, to me, all of this conversation today really just exemplifies your really grounded approach to this. This is important and complex work, and there's a lot of work to be done. I want to keep stressing that because the more we talk about it, it shows that it takes that level of intentionality and then the work to support it, because we don't have all of these things built into us. We have to develop these things within ourselves. And I think that it's so important the way you talk about it, but it also means that hearing you talk about it, time freaking flies by, Jennifer. This is so much fun hearing this stuff. I want to squeeze in 2 questions though, because like I said, I want to celebrate the fact that you've been in business for 9 years, making such a difference. You've talked a little bit about your team and how amazing of a team you've built along the way. Obviously, it didn't start out that way. I want to stress that for listeners, is that what you see of Jennifer's business today is the result of 9 years of growth and intention and strategy and yes, work. All of these things have been so key. So Jennifer, with that in mind, what do you look at when you look forward? Obviously, 2025 is upon us. There's going to be 9 more years and beyond of all the amazing work that you're doing. So what's the future look like with your own CEO and leadership hat on? What are those growth things that you're eyeing?
Well, absolutely. I'm glad that you said that. I've spent the last 3 months really focused on what our growth opportunities are. And I'll give a shout out to the Goldman Sachs program, 10,000 Small Businesses was selected to do that. So that's been so helpful. And me just taking the time every week for 8 hours, the CEO, to figure this out. So we are actually building out our e-learning platform. I've put together, just myself, not including the team, 33 different trainings over the years that I've personally delivered in person back in the old days of the business, and I would go and do in-person workshops. And so we are converting them to online. And one of our premier trainings is managing professional relationships. And so in 2025, we're doing a full launch of that content and offering some free webinars to people if they want to learn more. Also, they just want to take the course. It's $40 a seat, so super affordable, where they can get that learning and learn how to manage and lead in these really interesting times we're in, and how to have really tough conversations and work through conflict. So that's what we are doing. That's the growth opportunity upon us, and that's how we're entering 2025.
Yes, I love that. Such big work coming from you. I love the work that you've been doing, Jennifer, and I'm so excited to watch the work that you're also launching into the world, into the new year. And this last question, I want you to keep that entrepreneur hat on as well, because I love hearing that side of the way that you see the world. And obviously, we're being listened to by entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs all over the world at all different stages of their growth journey. So what's that one piece of advice, the one thing that you want to impart on them, having gone through 9 years of kind of their dream life, Jennifer? A lot of people would love to be in business for 9 years and beyond. So what's that one thing that you want to give to them today?
I would say get really clear about the impact you want to make and the scale. So those are the 2 things that I got really clear about in the very beginning. What's my impact and what's my scale? And that's informed every choice I've made along the way. I knew the business had to be bigger than me. It was just me in the beginning, solopreneur, and now I have people on the team who can do these different things, which is fantastic. And that's how I can increase the impact of our work and the scale of it. So figure out what that North Star is for you, and that can be a guiding light as you move forward.
Yes, so well said. And I want to call this out, Jennifer, because I think there's so much brilliance in that advice you just gave us. We way too often use that word scale in terms of monetary growth and revenue growth and, access to resources. But I think it's so important that when you just talked about scale right there with us, you emphasized we're talking about the scale of our impact. And more people on our team simply means we get to help more people and do more meaningful work. So huge kudos to you, Jennifer. I think in so many ways you exemplify all the good things about entrepreneurship and making a difference in the world. So you've got to drop those links on us. I've tooted your horn. I think your messaging, I think the mission that you're on with Abundance Leadership Consulting, there's so many uplifting things and important things in there. So you've got to drop those links on us. Where can listeners find out more about all the great work that you and your team are up to?
of course, you can follow us on our website at jennifersconyers.org. That's where you'll see all of our services, how we work, who we are, and team members. I also have a YouTube channel. You can look me up. It's Jennifer Sconyers. You'll see snippets of trainings from the past. You'll see, just little bits about how we work with people. And of course, on LinkedIn, you can follow me as well as the company. So those are some links. I'm happy to send them over to you, but that's where you can find me.
Yes, and listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find all of those links down below in the show notes. No matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode, you'll see Jennifer's name in the title of this episode. So it's super easy to see the spelling, jennifersconyers.org, jennifersconyers.org, or just click through from the show notes. It's the quickest and easiest way to find Jennifer. We're also linking to her YouTube channel, the LinkedIn pages as well. So Jennifer, huge kudos to you. Holy cow, LinkedIn is so much work. So I love the fact that you're putting content out there to serve even more people, which is right in line with how you show up in this world. So Jennifer, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is great.